Hey guys, it's Marcus of Balfour Declaration. So I want to go through something, guys, and this is really important for those of us who understand the truth and believe the truth. It's really important because we who understand that the children of the flesh are not the children of God, and we understand that we've been converted and that we're born again, and that we are spiritual stones. We're jewels, which is Jew. We're true Jews in the sight of God. God explains that a person must be converted, a person must be born again. And we all know that the first birth that you have, that's a carnal birth. That's the birth by your mother and your father. And that's of the seed of man. That's corruptible seed. And the Bible explains, going all the way back to Adam and Eve, that they corrupted themselves. And that corruption only brings forth corruption. Meaning the seed of Adam, which is the descendants, all men descended from Adam, they all just bring forth corrupt seed, which dies, which withers and falls away. So the Bible goes on to explain that in Adam all die. In Christ are all made alive. But if you're in Christ, the Bible explains that if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away, all things are become new. And that you're born again, not of the seed of man, but by the incorruptible word of God that liveth and abideth forever. Jesus said as much when he says, "My sheep, they believe. I know them. I give them eternal life. They shall never perish." And he's explaining that that's not talking about the flesh, because the Bible explains to us that all flesh shall perish and go back to the dust. Now, the idea of race is made up, guys. Race is an illusion. Race is just something that people have made to divide and conquer. And in fact, the word race just means competition amongst people. And they're basing it on this superficial division that they call race or color. That's why it's race. Race, according to the races, means that certain people have the right to rule because they're inherently superior to the other what? Races that they consider to be inferior. So in that competition of race, you know how you run a race, the people who invented racism believe that they're a chosen race. I remind you, race is an illusion. Race is a lie. All men came from Adam and Eve. Now, with that, we're going to talk about some things, because I think it's really important that you understand one of the key deceptions that the devil does. Because the Bible explains that men are wicked, because men love this world and men love the treasures of this world, the filthy lucres of this world, because men are lifted up in pride. Then people try to define race, and then they want you to have what? Racial pride. But to pull you into this racial pride paradigm, they first have to get you to buy into the concept of what? Race. They need you to start using their language. They need you to start adopting that and self-identifying yourself as being part of a race. And then they say, now that you've agreed that you're part of a race, we can divide and conquer you by that what? Race. We can start saying, hey, that group is responsible for all the problems and the ills of the world. Whereas we, on the whole, are generally being contributors to the human race. So they try to say race, and then they say, well, there's a human race, but within the human race, there's a chosen race, and those races are stratified with the superior to the inferior. Okay? Now, in doing this, these people who, again, are just men. They're sinners like everyone else. They're sinners, but, they're sinners who've amassed a certain amount of influence and power and position and prestige. And with that prestige, they have leverage. And with that leverage, they get to try to define how other people interact, what people see, and, war and influence. When you have that kind of position, you can collude against other people to get them, one, to buy into your concept of race, but then to stoke racism, because by stoking racism, you can continue to divide people and have people to buy into your paradigm. Okay. in the Bible explains that all those who are chosen are only chosen because God has chosen to choose all those who believe the gospel. And he says, when you believe, you're in him, and he had chosen us in him before the foundation of the world. Now, why would the Bible say he had chosen us in him before the foundation of the world, that we shall be holy and blameless before him in love? The reason why it says he had chosen us in him before the foundation of the world is because he's letting you know that he's not choosing man. He's not choosing the children of the flesh as his children, as his sheep. He's saying that, look, I'm choosing all those who will be in me. And since I'm the only one who's righteous, who's just, who's good, who's holy, who's blameless, you have all those things in me. So because you can't add to God or take away from God, but when you believe the gospel, you're a new creature created in God. He's saying, I've chosen myself. So the only way you can be chosen in a good way is to be chosen in me. And that's why it says, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away. All things are become new. Okay? I think that's pretty clear. So there's no contradictions in the Bible. So when the Bible says there's none righteous, no, not one, there's none good, no, not one, there's not a just man upon the earth, it's telling you the truth. It's explaining to you that the only way to become righteous or good or just is to be justified freely by his grace. He had chosen us in him, being found in him, having not mine own righteousness. Okay? I'm going to move on from that. So when you see in the Bible in 1 Peter 2:9, it says, but ye are a chosen generation, here, a royal priesthood. You know that when it's talking about a priesthood, it's talking about a priest that offers what? Sacrifices. Priests offer sacrifices. And God is saying that I'm not accepting the works of men's hands. It says they that are in the flesh can't please God. God doesn't dwell in the temple made with hands, neither does he worship with men's hands. And because God doesn't accept the works of men's hands, it explains that when you're born again, you're no longer a child of the flesh and you don't walk after the flesh. That it's the Spirit of God that worketh in you. It's God that worketh in you to do unto will of his good pleasure. And so it's saying that when people believe, you're offering to God what he's given you. Freely receive, freely give. God has given us the living water, the bread of life. And since we have eternal life, we're to go out and offer other people the bread of life and the living water. As we've received it by grace through faith, we offer to others by grace through faith. And when they believe, God's saying they're then partakers, right, of the spiritual bread and the spiritual drink. Okay? And so that's what the Bible is explaining to us, that we're offering up living sacrifice, because when they believe, they get what? I give unto them eternal life, they shall never perish. So God's saying, look, since I'm not accepting any man according to the flesh, because I'm no respecter of person, as I told Nicodemus, you must be born again. I'm saying that when you believe, then I'm receiving only what I've given. I'm the way, the truth, the life. And when you believe, you're offered up a living sacrifice, a spiritual sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, right? That's what God's explaining to us. That's what he says, flesh and blood cannot inherit nor enter the kingdom of God. Okay? So that explains that. So that's the generation. So the generation are all those who've been what? Regenerated by the regeneration, washing, renewing of the Holy Ghost. Here it is right here, actually. Not by works of righteousness, which we have done, but according to his mercy, he what? Saved us. So the chosen generation are those who are saved. And only once you're saved do you have the Savior in you, and then you can go out and offer what you've received to others. You've received Christ, as many as received him gave you power to become the sons of God. And now you can offer Christ. You're saying today, if you hear his voice, harden not your heart, because you're saying, receive what I've received. I received the bread of life. I received the living water. I'm offering you that bread of life. I'm offering you the living water, the same that I've received. And I'm doing that through what? Through the gospel message. So it says, by the washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Ghost. So that's just being born again, guys. Being born again, converted, regenerated, translated. These are all the same thing. So us who are truly Jews, our goal is to convert everyone. We're going to go out. We're trying to convert every person of every nation. We're saying we're converting. We're letting our light, God is light and in him is no darkness, shine before men, that they may glorify our Father that art in heaven. The children of the flesh are not the children of God. So we're telling those who are children of the flesh that they must be born again. And he said, once you're born again, then your Father is God, who's called the Father of spirits. Okay? Now, with that you are the chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praise of him who called you what? Out of darkness. Out of darkness. Because we all, before we're born again, we sat in what? Darkness. We are of this world. This world is considered to be in darkness. And God is saying, look, this world is darkness. The light came into the world and the darkness comprehended it not. This world is darkness. My kingdom is not of this world. It's not a kingdom of darkness. So he's saying, look, light hath no communion with darkness, which is why the Bible says, love not the world nor the things in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. I pray not for the world, right? So the Bible is explaining that because we're born again. We're born in the new kingdom. We're born in heaven, the heavenly kingdom, Jerusalem above, which is free as mother of us all, Galatians 4:26. So he's saying he calls it out of darkness into his marvelous light. Now, what I want to explain is that people would choose and pervert the Bible. Why would they pervert the Bible? As I told you, people who have carnal intentions, who really love this world, who are prideful and greedy, of course, they're going to try to get people to buy into a racial paradigm. And because they don't want to just say, hey, I'm just greedy and I want to kill and murder and steal. I come but for to kill, steal, and destroy. Since they don't want to own up to the fact that they're greedy, they're going to try to hide their sin, quote unquote, and use the Bible to justify, try to use God as their excuse for the sin that they do, meaning going around and conquering and stealing and taking other people's land and claiming that they're above other men. They say, I thank God I'm not like other men. I'm chosen of God. They're self-chosen. They're not really chosen of God. They're self-chosen. And then, of course, one of the things they would do is they would call themselves chosen of God, and they would mislabel themselves and come up with a scheme to try to hide the fact that the only thing they're doing is they're just trying to gain more of this earth for their own purposes. Okay? So KJFE says you're a chosen generation. As you look at the Bibles, how they've been changed, this concept comes in that's a man-made concept. You're a chosen race. Now, what I want you to take note of, guys, it doesn't say you're a chosen races. Because remember, races is plural. When it says you're a chosen race, this isn't like, oh, you're a chosen race, meaning the whole human race is chosen. No, it says ye are a chosen race. They're specifically trying to identify, there's one group who they're trying to identify and say they're a chosen race. Now, why is that significant? The reason why it's significant is because if you were to go to Deuteronomy 7:6, the way that they've changed the Bible here, the way they've perverted it to say you're a chosen race, when you know that's not true, because again, he had chosen us in him. And if you're in him, you're a new creature. And if you're a new creature in him, you're no longer a child of flesh. You're a child of the promise. And God's called the Father of spirits, and spirits don't have flesh and bones. So if spirit doesn't have flesh and bones, the spirit doesn't have skin. So thusly, how would you know who a child of God is? Because given that the children of the flesh are not children of God, that excludes all children of the flesh. Because those are people who were born the first time of corruptible seed. You have to be born again. And when you're born again, it says your life is hid in God. If a life is hid in God, that's apparently saying you can't see my life because my life is hid in God. Because God is my what? Righteousness, my holiness, my sinless perfection. So if my life is hid in God, there's no way I can say it's according to any man's flesh because I can see any man's flesh. That's not a hidden life. That's the life everyone can see. And the other thing that you can see is you can see that all men are sinners and you can see that all men perish. So God made it very easy for us not to be fooled or perplexed, no matter how they tried to convolute it, how they tried to use big words to get around it, to wordsmith it. God has told us very plainly, look, I don't care. You guys are looking at the outward appearance. You're looking at the flesh. And God's just saying very simply, the children of the flesh are not children of God. In fact, I'm going to say this. They that are in the flesh cannot please God. I'm not only that, I'm going to say the flesh lusts against the spirit. And there's no way, if you believe the very basic concepts that God's told you, that you could be fooled or tricked by any idea of God having a what? A chosen race. That's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. So you know this is a perversion. They did it here. They did it here, CSB. They did it, well, they didn't do it there. They did it here. You are a chosen race, NASB. NET, chosen race. I mean, they really want to get this in these modern Bibles. They want to say, chosen race. You're like, why would they do this? You're an elect race, right? And even when they say elect, when it says, who can lay charge to God's elect? Is God that justifieth? Who is he that condemneth? There's no condemnation of those who are where? In Christ Jesus. So all the elect are elect because they're in God. God is actually elect. And he's saying, when you're in me, you become elect in me. You're elect in the what? The body, the spiritual body of Christ. That's why it says, who can lay charge to God's elect? Because you can't charge God with sin, and you can't charge those who are born again, because all those who are born again, their life is hid where? Colossians 3. Their life is hid in God. So you can charge my old man according to the flesh, but everybody who's born again, they're not trying to be justified in their flesh. Everyone who's born again, these are all people who understood that in their flesh dwells no good thing. These are all people who realize that they all have sinned and come short of the glory. These are all people who've humbled themselves before God and believe the gospel. So we're not trying to justify ourselves in the flesh. We're all those who said, look, I need to be born again, and my righteousness, my justification, my holiness is all going to be in God. So I need to believe. I need to be born again of a whole new seed. And it's not a corrupt carnal seed. It's by the spiritual seed, the word of God that liveth in the body what? Forever. So these are new creatures created in Christ. And so we understand that. So that cannot be true. YLT, you are a choice race. Okay? And of course, Darby. Darby was, one of the first, ones who corrupted the Bible. He's the early corrupter of the Bible. And when we look at when this was done, when did they do this corruption? Well, it's 1867, right? 1867. Darby, right? He's corrupting the Bible in 1867, and he's trying to include the word race. And you got to ask yourself, well, what does that mean? You're a chosen race. You know it's not true, but if you take the word race and you go back to Deuteronomy 7:6, you understand what their goal is, what the agenda is. Because you take the word race and you say, okay, well, if I'm going to interpret it the way they're trying to get people to interpret it, based on the way that they're trying to show signs and lying signs and wonders, then I'll take the word race and I say, when it comes here and says, for thou art an holy people, you include the word race. For thou art an holy race unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special race, elect race, special race. Remember, they changed it up here. Let me show you. Elect, special. Thou art a special race unto himself above all what? Races that are upon the face of the earth. So it's very clear what the agenda is, guys. So what you have is you simply have people who were doing colonialism under manifest destiny, what they used to call British Israelism, because they believed that they were God's chosen race, and they were using that to justify their theft and their robbery and their rape and their killing and their stealing. And of course, they didn't want to just say, hey, you know what? I'm just a greedy sinner. I'm just a greedy SOB. So they just said, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all this and just say, well, no, I'm doing this because God has given me the special decree to go out and conquer the land. Now, guys, you and I, we understand that all men were formed from what? The dust of the earth, from the land, right? From dust will I form and back to dust will I go. So it's explaining that when we're conquering the land, well, what was made from the dust? The flesh. The flesh of Adam was made from the dust, right? So conquering the land is conquering what? The flesh, because it says the flesh lusts against the what? Spirit. And they that are in the flesh cannot please what? God. Right? So the Bible is talking about conquering the land. It's just saying people being born again. And when you're born again, you're dying to self. You're dying to the old man, which is dying to the man that's of this world, which is the land. So you're destroying the enemy because you yourself have chosen to die to self. It's like if you're in a war, you know that you've lost that war because you understand that the enemy is death. And you're saying, how can I conquer this great enemy that lords over this whole world, that enemy being death? And so you say, you know what? God tells me the way to do that is to believe. And then when I believe, I die to the old man and I get eternal life. And death cannot conquer eternal life, right? Because I'm no longer a child of the flesh. I'm a child of the promise, a spiritual child of God. So that's what the Bible is explaining very clearly, right? So these guys, they want to include things like race because they want to practice racism. Now, the trick, here's the one of the key tricks that they've done. They used to do this under what they call Manifest Destiny. It's the same thing, just rebranded. When they did it under Manifest Destiny, they had the papal bulls, the Pope so-called did it, and he had his little thing, he's going around telling people to conquer the savages and the heathen, and we got to civilize them, right? And of course the Pope did it, right? And then you had the Crusades, and you had what? Colonialism under Christopher Columbus, and sort of the Manifest Destiny thing. And when they first came again to the Americas, they considered the Americas to be what? New Jerusalem. They don't tell you that they consider the Americas to be New Jerusalem. New Haven was New Heaven in Connecticut, and all these things, right? And so these guys cross land and sea to do what? Get a what? Proselyte, by trying to convince people that they're of the what? Chosen race. And in doing so, they brought forth what? Death. Because they, in their mind, because they're trying to pervert the word of God, instead of it being spiritually discerned, when they talked about the sword being the word, which destroys the enemy, which is death, out of his mouth proceeded the sword. Well, it's talking about the word of God being a sword, because when you're born again, you conquer the enemy, which is death. They hate that. They hate that spiritual interpretation. So what they've convinced you is they said, no. A Jew is based on the flesh. A Jew is based on the corrupt seed from Adam and Eve. A Jew is based on the corrupt seed from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's based on the flesh. God is saying, no, that's a lie. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're all people who believed. And when you believe, you're what? Converted. You're converted to what? Not a child of the flesh. This is the whole point of Nicodemus. The conversation when Jesus says, if you go back into your mother's womb, what does that profit? Your mother's womb is corrupt. She's born of corrupt seed. So what are you talking about? Can a man enter again into his mother's womb? No, you got to be born from Jerusalem above, which is free as mother was all, by the Spirit. Okay? So they hate that notion, guys. They absolutely hate it. But they absolutely love, and they embrace, and they worship at the altar of respect to a person. See, they invented, race is the tool, it's a critical and crucial tool in the toolbox of the colonialists. And the reason why they want to claim that Jew is a race is because they're still doing the same thing, but they needed to hide what they're doing. And so they said, how do we create a buffer between our old colonialism endeavors and our notion of what we propagated as white supremacy? How can we claim we're not doing things under white supremacy anymore? Well, because we're pretending to be so-called progressive and pretending to be multicultural. And how can we do it? Well, we'll just claim now that Jew is a race. We'll usurp the biblical definition. We'll redefine it. We'll kill some people to try to demonstrate and take a photo op and say, look, based on this image that we're giving you, this should help you understand the quote unquote color of a Jew. But here's the duplicity. We're going to tell you that Jew is a race, but despite what you see, we're going to say it's not of the what? White race. Now, again, race is invented. Race is a lie. But they needed a way to say, how can we do the same thing we've always been doing? Fool people into thinking it's prophecy, and then make them think that, oh, the solution is going to be the chosen race with the chosen king who happens to be what? Share the same skin complexion as us, but we're not going to call them white. We're going to say that they're, quote, what? That they're Jews. Right? And to a certain extent, again, all they're trying to do is keep in place their power structure and actually gain more power. Right? But see, the reason they use race is because now when they put it under a racial classification, they can say anytime someone says something against this, they actually want you to say that it's the Jews. They actually want you to identify it as a Jewish race, because then they can say, oh, you're anti-Semitic. You don't believe in our right to self-determination. You're a conspiracy theorist. So they actually want. See, the guys behind this, this is for them. They think this is a master. They think this is a master stroke in ingenuity. They think this is they're like, we get to create this lie that Jew is a race, and that way, anytime something gets done, we can do it, and we can like leak out information and let the person who does it have the label of Jew, of the Jewish race, even though that's a lie. I'm a Jew. Anybody who's born again is a Jew, but that's a spiritual thing. That's something that came by belief, by faith, not by genealogy. They actually want you to identify it as something physical, because that way when you say it, they can use the laws of what? They can use the laws of progressiveness. They can use the law of discrimination, and they can use that to shut you up, because they can say, oh, you're criticizing a racial group. But it's not a racial group. It's not a racial group. The colonists want it to be a racial group. Those who are in power, the elitist, supremacist elitists, want it to be a racial group. They actually don't care. They actually embrace anti-Semitism, because in doing that, they're trying to reinforce the idea, oh, the world hates God's chosen people. So when these guys are doing these things under the guise of, and then blaming the false identity that they've given to Jews, to people who they call Jews, who are really not, they get to hide behind that label, but still do the things that they want to do. They think this is a masterstroke. They're like, we get to do these things, and we don't care if people see or think that it's so-called the Jews. We want them to say it's the Jews. That way they can blame the Jews, and we can say, oh, it's that same old trope, anti-Semitism. But they're the ones who invented something called the Jewish race. They invented race. The only reason race was invented, guys, was to practice racism. That's the only reason. And you have to go back to the basics. In the Bible, it talks about the true Jews being a light to the world. Now we know that to be a light to the world means you must have the light. And we know God is light, and in him is no what? Darkness. So all of us who have God working in us to do unto will of his good pleasure, which is to give the gospel, we're going out to do what? Again, convert. Which is what, in the Bible, what are the Jews supposed to do? They're supposed to go out and convert. They're to go out and convert. You can look in Ruth. I'm going to show you this because this is important. It says, in every promise, in every city, whatsoever the king's commandment, his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast, bread, living water, enter my rest, Sabbath, good day, right? And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the knowing therefore the terror of the Lord, we persuade man. The fear of the Jews fell upon them. Look, many people of the land became Jews. Now, people of what land? These are people who were born again. And it talks about they were born again. But I want you to talk about, it says the Jews had light. Who's our light? Who's our joy? Who's our joy? Right? So it talks about, listen. Let me show you this. It talks about the gospel being published throughout the world, right? Given every province. Oh, look. A copy of the writing commandment to be given into every province was published unto all people, right? That the Jews should be ready against the day to avenge themselves on their enemy. Who is your enemy? Well, of course, it's all the children of the flesh, because look, guys, let me show you this. See if this is okay, that's wrong. Listen. But as then he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the spirit, even so it is now. So who's the enemy? Look. Walk in the flesh, he should not fulfill the lust of the spirit. Listen. For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the what? Spirit. And listen to this. I'm trying to find a certain. For the flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. So it's telling you that a Jew is not one outwardly, neither is that circumcision outward, which is in the flesh, but a Jew is one inwardly. And circumcision is that by the heart in the spirit. And if you're in the spirit, you're not in the flesh. So the Bible is explaining that you've been converted. And so it's saying the enemy that wars against us, they that are in the flesh can't please God. The children of the flesh are at enmity with God. So it's saying, look, the enemy to us is talking about people who are not converted versus people who are converted. But what we're doing is we're using our battle is not a carnal thing. It's not a carnal battle. Sorry about that, small d. If I could just say this element. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. So when it's talking about we're going out, guys, we're getting vengeance against the enemy, which is death. And so we're saying we're going to destroy that enemy, which is death. And we understand all people who are children of the flesh, they will perish. And we're going to defeat that because we're saying the sword of the word of God says you'll be born again of what? Instead of perishing, you'll be born again of imperishable what? Seed. Imperishable seed. Right? So that's what it's talking about with the sword. It destroys the enemy, which is death. And it tells you, look, enemy. But the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. So it's explaining, guys, we get avenge themselves on their enemies. And it talks about these things. This is all spiritually discerned, guys. All spiritually discerned. Fine linen and purple, rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And it's talking about just going out to all these people. It's going out. Let me show you at the top where it talks about. Listen. There were the king's scribe called at that time the 3rd month, that is the month of Sevian, right? On the 23rd day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews and to the lieutenants and deputies and rulers and provinces, which are from, listen, guys, listen, from India to Ethiopia. India to Ethiopia. Listen, 127 provinces. 127 provinces. Unto every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writings and according to their language. And it's saying this, guys. It's basically saying that it went out, and it talks about all the provinces, how it says it was published unto all people. Remember, from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces. And it talks about this fine linen. You know that's in the Bible. the righteousness. They had light. Who's the light? God is light, and in him is no darkness. Gladness, joy, and honor. Every province and in every city. It's talking about how people believe. In every province, there was someone who believed. Preached the word. And it says, and the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews. Right? And so, of course, that's called conversion. But when you go to Bible references where it says many of the people of the land became Jews, listen, many of the people, this is in one day. What day is that, guys? They had a good day. What day is that? How do you become a Jew? Enter my rest. The Sabbath rest. Being found in him, having not my own righteousness. Right? So it's talking about that. And it says how many of the people of the land became Jews. Well, what they said here, they said, look, they forgot to change it in a lot of these. They forgot to change in a lot of these modern Bible versions. But then here's what they did in the ESV, where we saw where they had the chosen race lie. It says many of the people of the country declared themselves Jews. So now they're trying to say, oh, there's no conversion here. Don't go start thinking that people were born again because they were publishing the gospel. You know, the glad tidings, good news. You know how the world has their news that they publish? It's saying, we let our light shine, and we're talking about we have the words of life, and we're publishing that. Cry aloud and spare not. Because we want to preach to every creature. We want to destroy every enemy, which is death. And so they're saying here, they're like, no. They just declared themselves to be Jews. Why? Because it's talking about from India to the Ethiopian, 127 provinces. And they're like, well, that doesn't match with our chosen race. So they just, with no haste, they said, we need to change this, right? They declared themselves to be Jews, right? CSB. Notice these are the Bible versions where they included race, right? Oh, they professed themselves to be Jews, right? Look at this. Here they forgot to change it. Many of the people of the land became. Look at this. Became. Forgot to change it, right? But look at NET. Chosen race. People pretended to be Jews. So this is what they're doing. They'll change a Bible here and there. And they say, oh, the real interpretation is that, because someone will automatically say, well, wait a minute. If this is a belief system and it's something that you believe, then it can't be a race. And so you can change a person's mind. A person can believe a lie, and then you go and tell them the truth. Jesus, I'm the way, the truth, the life. And then they believe. And once they believe, what must I do to be saved? Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved. Once they believe, then you've convinced them to convince the gainsayer, right? Right? Harden not your heart, right? Once they believe, the Bible's saying once you believe, you pass from death to life. And it's saying that now you're a new creature, and you become what? The true circumcision, which worship God in spirit and rejoice in Christ and have no confidence in the flesh. So they just said, we don't like that. Our whole idea is that we're trying to convince everyone that there's a race, a chosen race. And to make this thing believable, we're going to have to blame them sometimes, because we need to try to distance the fact that we did this under white supremacy. And now we're trying to say, well, no, it's not white supremacy anymore. So we're going to say, no, it's the Jews. So in part of their plan and part of their plot to convince the world, they said, well, we're going to have to kill some people to do this, because that's the only way they're going to believe that this isn't just plain old white supremacy continuing as it always was. So they said, okay, we'll kill some people, and then that'll gain the sympathy, and then we can take the focus back off all the colonized people who are considered to be dark-skinned people, and we can just say now it's these other people who we're going to claim are Jews, who may share our complexion, but we'll just say to them, hey, I know they may, despite what you may see, they're not white. We don't classify them as white. So you can't say it's white supremacy. In fact, if you try to say that, we're gonna hope you blame them. That way we can say you're being anti-Semitic, and we'll just disarm your argument by saying, oh, are you blaming the so-called Jews? Because they're trying to use that label as a buffer, right? As a proxy. So it's saying many of the resident peoples pretended to be Jews. Think about that, guys. Pretended. Even Darby, many among the people of the lands became Jews. This is what's so funny about it. These guys change the Bibles, and then they don't realize they think God wrote His word perfect, right? And so God is exposing their lies. But then they make changes, and then they realize, oops. That's why you're like, why do they have so many versions? Because they made the one change, and then they realize, oh man, this refutes us right here. It says many people in the land became Jews. They said, oh man, okay, now we're just gonna say, well, there's no real Bible you can really truly believe. That you're just gonna have to all of them have some truth, and that way we can say, well, let's read from this one on this part. Let's read from this one, because they know they can't. Their lie gets easily found out because they didn't know what parts to corrupt. They thought, well, we'll just corrupt this part. And it's just like, oh, now this part doesn't match. So we got to come up with another. We'll get on the next version of a new translation. We'll change that part. Right? And so they say, okay, well, we have to do something. Well, we'll just say in the other version, we'll just say many of the people declared themselves or pretended to be Jews. Right? Let's read from the NET on this. When they get to this one in your so-called church, they say, let's read from the NET. Pretended. Because, guys, that doesn't lend. Again, you gotta think about what they're trying to teach you. That doesn't lend itself to the idea of ye are a chosen race, right? You can't convert to a race, guys. There's no way. You're not converting to a race. So so hopefully you get this, right? Hopefully you get what I'm talking about. I'm gonna go on. Now, with that, I want to show you some other stuff. This is a guy. And again, you get these guys, right? And he's on what they call JTV. It says Jewish Ideas, Global Relevance, right? And he's talking all this stuff. And, you see this guy, Dr. Alan Mendoza, and all this kind of stuff. And he's trying to convince you, they want to convince you that Jew is a race. It's very imperative that they teach you that Jew is a race. They really want you to believe it very strongly. And again, they don't care if you're anti-Semitic, because in their mind, if you're anti-Semitic, that strengthens their argument. Because, let's face it, the elite racists were the ones who invented race, and they're the ones who sacrificed 6 million just so they can get the photo to say, well, this is what God's chosen people look like. Can't you see their skin? Can't you see the complexion? That's God's chosen race. That's why they did. That's why they were there, Johnny on the spot, So this just shows the level of greed in men. Like what lengths men will go to for their greed. The people who are behind this stuff, guys, it's not like they need more money, but they're just their hearts are desperately wicked. They just want more money, right? So and power. So look at this.
Interviewing Andrew Roberts, distinguished author and historian, whose most recent book was a 1-volume life on Napoleon, and whose next book will be a 1-volume life on Winston Churchill. Andrew, thanks for joining me.
Now, the funny thing about Napoleon was one of the first what they call Zionists. Now, again, the problem with the word, again, you got to understand these people co-opt the Bible. So when they say Zionist and when they say Jew, they have a completely different definition than what the biblical definition is, right? And so God exposes it because God says, I know them that say they're Jews and they're not. He says, my kingdom is not of this world. And people just like, I don't really care what God said. You mean children of the flesh aren't children of God. They're the apple of God's eye. But it says they in their flesh can't please God. They're like, I don't really care what the Bible says. They are pleasing to him. But it says if you're not born again and you can't please him, you don't have faith. From faith to faith, without faith it's impossible to please God. What are you talking about? They don't care. They really don't care what the Bible says, guys. They're using the Bible for their own purposes. And do you think they care what the Bible really says? No, that's why they're changing it. They're like, how do we justify ourselves? We're just greedy people, right? They're the ones who invented race. I'm telling you, they invented race to use race. I'm saying, look, all men are sinners and all men are wicked. But these specific group of men invented the concept of race. Then they want to claim God has a chosen race. And then they're going to try to hide behind that idea of a chosen race to try to hide their obvious racism. Because why did you invent even the notion of a chosen race? And if a Jew is truly a faith and a belief, you can't tell me that Hitler knew everybody who believed something. And the other thing that's really dumb about it, guys, is Jacob had a twin brother named Esau. Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated. Well, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. How would you know who's the descendant of Jacob versus Esau? But if they had the same bloodline, the same exact parents, and they were twins, it's a moot point. It's even more of a moot point, given that it says the children of the flesh are not the children of God, and they that are in the flesh can't please God. You can't say you're the apple of God's eye when it says they that are in the flesh can't please God, and you're trying to base your whole theology, trying to say, well, it's based on foolish genealogy. It just doesn't work, guys. And so, listen to what this guy says.
I'm going to start with your books, actually. Although we're current affairs, I want to take it back to both Napoleon and Churchill, both of whom were friends, I suppose, of the Jewish people at a time when many others were not. What was it, if anything, that links them together on that? What motivated them, and what, in a sense, were the results of that?
Well, it's a very good question. They were friends of the Jewish people in that they helped the Jewish people, both of them, but two different men from very different aspects of philo-Semitism. Napoleon didn't like Jews. He did great things for them. He liberated them. He let them out of the ghettos. He gave them civil and religious liberty. But he did it for French reasons, for entirely imperialistic French reasons. He realized that free Jews were a tremendous way of making a nation richer. And that was...
Now, I want you to listen to this self-serving definition, guys. Mind you, a Jew is not a race. But this is a self-serving definition. And it's actually tying into this positive, self-aggrandizing stereotype. It's tying into this stereotype because if you know Jew is not a race, what he's saying makes no sense. What he's saying is basically saying, if you believe Jew is a race, then you'd say, well, okay, are Ethiopians Jews? If you're going to say it's a race, then how do you account for Ethiopians? If you're going to say it's a race, how do you account for Moses' Ethiopian wife? If you're going to say it's a race, how do you account for the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt at Mount Sinai? It cannot be a race. So your whole definition is flawed because what you're saying makes absolutely no sense, even from the most basic Bible reading. Makes no sense. And he's saying this thing, he's like, well, you know, they could benefit from the Jews because he's going to try to do this positive attribution of what? Listen to him.
The reason that he did it, he appreciated their contributions to the arts, to science, to literature, to all of the great things, but he also wanted to ensure that France took advantage of their genius for commerce and finance.
So who's feeding in who? See, they don't mind the stereotypes and the racism when it's positive. It's just when people say, well, I'm noticing these things that are negative. See, they're the ones who invented race. They're the ones who are creating this label. And then they're trying to do these positive things. It's like saying, well, you know, I really appreciate the so-called blacks because they this, that, blah, 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 the other. You know, you want to give these positive generalizations and stereotypes. But then, okay, well, if you're going to be on the positive side of that, then what about the negative side of that? Since you're going to try to tie into that. Now, the question becomes, does he consider them to be a race? Because he's saying all this stuff about their genius and their contribution and how nations can benefit from that. As if the way to say, well, the way that the nation can be really advanced or have benefit is, of course, to have what? To have who? Who do you need to have there? So what is he saying? You got to really listen to what people say and understand what they mean. Don't just look at it like, that's a very positive. No, you got to understand. He's basically saying that they're smart and this and that. And he's saying, well, basically, they're elevated above other folks. Again, it's a lie because Jew is not a race. Jew is not a race. It's got nothing to do with a race. And in fact, he's talking about it says the carnal mind is at enmity with God. So what he's saying is he's talking about doing things to contribute to this world. And it says, love not the world nor the things in this world. So everything he's saying is antithetical to what the Bible actually teaches. He's talking about how do you contribute to this world. God's saying, I don't dwell in a temple made with hands, neither my worship with man's hands. Love not the world nor the things in the world. My kingdom is not of this world. But he's telling you the opposite. Let's listen.
Churchill, on the other hand, very different. He wanted the maximum amount of liberty and freedom for Jews because he realised that they had given a greater contribution than any other race to the great causes of civilization in...
They had given a greater contribution to any other race. So now do you see what's going on here? You gotta think about this. These two guys, let's look at them. Look at their so-called skin color, right? They want to believe in race, right? So race, complexion, whatever the hell nebulous definition you want to use. He's using the word race. Greater contribution than any other race. That's what he just said. That's what he just said. There's no question what he just said. And that's when we go back to this. Where's it at? We go back to Deuteronomy 4:7-6. For thou art an holy race unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God had chosen thee to be a special race unto himself above all races that are upon the face of the earth. This is what this guy is saying. Oh, they contribute more than any other race. Why is he saying that? Why do they need to say things like this? Because he's trying to say, well, guess who should be above everyone else? Well, the ones who obviously contribute, because it's a race. It's a competition. So who's at the top of the competition? He's telling you what he wants you to believe. This thing is actually out in plain sight. See, these guys, they speak, and they kind of speak in code, but you can decode what they're saying if you understand the Bible. You can understand what lie they're trying to get you to believe. So he's saying right here, he's telling you, he's like,
because he realised that they had given a greater contribution than any other race to the great causes of civilization in human history, and said so on a regular basis, despite many of the other people from his natural milieu, the upper classes, the British aristocracy of the late 19th and early 20th century, being anti-Semitic. And so these...
So this is the part where he's saying, well, Churchill, we're supposed to believe, here's what he's trying to get us to believe. He's trying to get us to believe that Churchill went against the British aristocracy, the elites. This is what he really wants us to believe. He wants us to believe, well, this isn't just racism or white supremacy, supporting white supremacy under the guise of creating another classification that they can call Jews to give a distance to their colonialist endeavors. No, the aristocracy actually, they were actually anti-Semitic. So now he's trying to make this distinguishment. He's trying to say, well, don't consider them to be so-called white now. We can't have that. It's really important that he's, because how you have black, brown, red, yellow, and white. It's really important for him to say, no, please don't identify them as being white, because this will expose, if they're identified as white, then people just say this is just white supremacy. Manifest that it's the same old thing. You guys have just rebranded yourself, and how low of you to kill a group of people just so you can try to hide behind them and use their death to make profit. That's what people would say. So he's saying no. Churchill went against the aristocracy. Now the question becomes, when does a person go against the rich elite in society? That generally doesn't go over very well, right? But this is what this man wants you to believe. It's like saying, well, the president who's elected based on the people who lobby, who give money and funds to the campaign to get that person in office, they all of a sudden decide to go against the very people who put them in office. Right? That's what he wants. That's what he's trying to convince us. He's like, Churchill he could just go against, the rich aristocratic elites in Britain. And he's trying to say they're anti-Semitic because he's trying to say that's a very slick way of saying, I'm going to interject that they're a special race that contributed more than any other race. But then I'm going to say they were anti-Semitic. I'm using Semitic because the reason I need to do that is because I'm trying to say, well, don't consider them to be white. This is my way of distancing a white supremacist agenda, disguising itself as under a new classification of a false identity of a Jewish race. Jew is not a race, it's a belief. Anybody can believe and be converted and become a Jew. That's a spiritual thing. That's not a carnal thing. When you convert, when a person gets converted, it's based on telling you something. It's based on me giving you glad tidings, and then you believe it and you're converted. That's not because, oh, well, how do I convert you? Well, let's have sex and then you'll be converted to a Jew. No, that's not what happened. We just read many of the people in the land became Jews. It's because they published the glad tidings to all men. And many people believe, and they became Jews. Guys, this is not some mystery here. But the reason I'm doing this is because I just want you to look at this video yourself. Anthony Roberts, Global Attitude on Jews. And it's on JTV, of course. I just want you to see how the duplicity and how slick and how seemingly sophisticated these guys try to be in their lies. Because they're trying to, on one hand, again, he's trying to tout or cement the idea of one, you have to buy into the idea of race, which is a lie. And then he's trying to get you, and he's basically trying to teach you racism because he's trying to say, oh, the Jewish race is basically saying intellectually they contributed more than any other race. And then he's like, well, let's not think this is white supremacy because, Churchill went against the British elite aristocracy. They were anti-Semitic. Hint, wink, wink, wink. Let's listen a little bit more.
Men both were Philo-Semites in terms of policy, but only Churchill really was Philo-Semitic in terms of his emotions and his natural intellectual development.
And I suppose his core belief as well in that point. And if we look at Churchill for 1 second and move into that area, of course, one of his, signature causes was Zionism. I mean, he was a famous Zionist in this regard, again, somewhat bucking the trend on that. How do you think Churchill would view how Israel is viewed in the world today?
So Churchill was bucking the trend, but it was the British who signed it was the British mandate, and they signed the Balfour Declaration. But he was bucking the trend. And there's something before that called British Israelism, which said that the British aristocracy thought they were the chosen people by royal bloodline. But we're supposed to believe that he was actually bucking the trend. Let's look up something real quick, guys. I want to show you something else. Okay, so we saw that the Bible changes were happening. I think what we said the Bible change happened here, and we saw that we go down to let's see, it was Darby. We find out that they made this change 1867. British Israelism was before 1840. Exactly. So, of course, when you believe this stuff, you're going to change the Bibles. And it says it came with English writings such as John Wilson's Our Israelite Origin. Numerous British Israelite organizations were set up throughout Britain's empire as well as the U.S. from the 1870s onward. 1870s onward. Well, you're going to have to get those Bibles out first, guys. Right? 1867. Further revisions, 1872. We're going to have to, we're going to teach this, but we got to get the word ready because you're going to pretend to be reading it from the Bible. So he said it was in Britain and it was America. America's just a spinoff of Britain. This is a whole colonialist spinoffs. This is the offspring of the colonialist belief system. And they did it under religion. British Israelism, also called Anglo-Israelism, is a pseudo-archaeological belief that the people of British Isles are genetically, racially, and linguistically the direct descendants of the 10 lost tribes. See, they're all trying to concentrate on the flesh, guys. It's dumb. It doesn't, everybody descended from Adam and Eve, so you can just stop the stupidity, right? And it talks about whose roots in 16th British Israelism inspired by the 19th century English writings such as John Wilson, 1840, Our Israelite Origin. So this is stuff they actually believed in, right? And it talks about a number of these organizations independently active as the early 21st century. In America, the idea gave rise to what? The Christian identity movement, right? It says Christian identity is an interpretation of Christianity which advocates the belief that only Germanic, Anglo-Saxons, Celtic, Nordic, and Aryan people and people of kindred blood are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and are therefore the descendants of the ancient Israelites. There you have it. So guys, this is not something I'm just making up. You can see the perversions that they had in the Bible, and you can see what they're talking about. And they talk about here, refuted by, they say this refuted. But so they just tried to flip the script. They're trying to say, well, wait a minute, we can't. If we say it's British Israelism after we've gone through and done all this racism, people are going to see right through this. So we're going to flip the script, and Churchill's going to say, well, we're going to pretend to be distanced. And even though it's going to be a British endeavor to create Zionism, we're going to say that the aristocratic, aristocratic royal elites were actually against it. I actually went against them. If you believe such silly lies.
I think he'd hate it. He very much was a supporter, of course, of the creation of the State of Israel, when an awful lot of other people, including the Foreign Secretary of the day, the Labour Foreign Secretary, Ernest Bevin, who went along with it, whilst being an anti-Semite, and I don't think there's any much doubt in it. When I've looked at some of the papers of Clement Attlee, leader of the Labour Party, of course, but also Prime Minister at the time of the creation of the State of Israel, in the Bodleian Library at Oxford, I found all sorts of horribly anti-Semitic things that he wrote as well, in letters to his brother, for example. And so one has to forget all this stuff about socialists being much more likely to be pro-Jewish. It just simply wasn't the case, at least amongst British socialists in the 1940s. It was just not true. The fact was you had some extraordinary, totally wonderful people like Winston Churchill who were Zionists, and then an establishment that was appallingly anti-Zionist, and a Foreign Office, of course, in Whitehall, which was ideologically and institutionally anti-Israel.
And this,
So the Foreign Office was institutionally anti-Zionist. The Foreign Office was anti-Zionist. Okay, let's just make sure we understand this. Let's see. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to you and approved by the Cabinet. Oh, the Foreign Office. Okay. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment of Palestine as a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Okay, that they lied about that. Or the right of the political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country, right? In any other. Listen, I should be grateful. We should bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation, right? The Zionist Federation. So there you go. So that kind of refutes a little bit of what he's saying. I mean, not a little bit. That kind of refutes what he's saying, right? So he's like, oh, the establishment was so anti. Not coming out that way. Now, one of the things he said, Winston Churchill, he said he was just amazing. He's like, Winston Churchill was great. Well, listen to this. This is Good Morning America, Good Morning Britain. So, of course, in the any type of news organization, guys, it's called Good Morning Britain. News organizations are propaganda pieces. That's what they are. The news, if you don't know, news is just it's like a branch of the military. It's they're trying to tell you what to believe, what you should believe about why wars happen, what's going on. It's just news is a tool. Okay. Now this guy's going to come in. He's going to talk about Churchill. This guy said there are people who are wonderful like Churchill, but Churchill was pro-Zionism. Well, let's listen.
Now, why?
Why? I mean, historical.
Should be celebrated as a great leader. But Professor Kehinde Andrews says people put Churchill on a pedestal, but history shows he's a racist. Now,
Now, the professor is just saying people put him on a pedestal, but history shows he's a racist. He's basically saying we shouldn't put the man on a pedestal. History shows he's a racist. Now, what is inherently wrong with that? There's absolutely nothing wrong. He's saying, he says people, if you truly believe in these things that you claim that you believe in, you should not put them on a pedestal. If you believe it. Now, if you're a hypocrite and you're claiming you don't believe in racism, but then you find out a person is a racist, it's just like, here's the funny thing. If they find out that he was a rapist, right? That he was going around raping women and that he did all these horrible things to women, beat them, raped them, molested little children. If they find out all that stuff, and would they sit here on this channel and say, hey, that's okay. That's all right. They wouldn't say that, right? But I want you to listen to how this goes over.
Why?
Why? I mean, the historical record here is clear. Even Boris Johnson admits that he was a...
Also, I want you to notice how the supposedly anchors, the independent anchors who are on this station, I don't even think they call these things news stations anymore. They're such a joke. I want you to notice how the anchors, it's very clear what they're trying to do. It's very clear that this guy is the quote unquote a minority view on this show. And they stack the deck against them pretty much. Listen to the questions, the nature of the questions, and how they challenge them.
He was someone who believed that the white race was superior, that natives didn't have any right to their lands in the Americas, that Indians were a ghastly people, and just was a general imperialist racist.
Is there any way that...
Now listen what this is very different. It's a very different description than what this guy said. Let's listen.
Wonderful people like Winston Churchill who were in letters to his brother, for example. And so one has to forget all this stuff about socialists being much more likely to be pro-Jewish. That just simply wasn't the case, at least amongst British socialists in the 1940s. It was just not true. The fact was you had some extraordinary, totally wonderful people like Winston Churchill who were Zionists.
Okay.
And then...
So you got to understand, let's go back. This guy was saying that, he's called Jew a race. He talked about how they contributed more than any other race to all these different countries that they resided in. And then he says Churchill was a wonderful person. So Churchill's a wonderful person, and he was pro-Jewish race. And he said he's pro the Jewish race. Well, then you get this guy. You got to question. You got to say, well, what's going on here, guys? Because he was pro-Jewish race, but
why? I mean, the historical record here is clear. Even Boris Johnson admits that he was a racist. He was someone who believed that the white race was superior, that natives didn't have any right to their...
So he believed the white race was superior, but he was pro-Jewish. I'm just trying to figure out how that works. He was a racist, but he believed that this guy, Churchill, is a racist. But this guy says Churchill is a wonderful guy. And he was saying that Churchill is pro-Jewish. And that they can contribute to any nation. But Churchill's a racist. But he's pro-Zionism. What do you think is going on here, guys? What do you think is going on? I pretty much laid it out for you, but isn't it very clear what's going on here? This is duplicity. This is trying to make a new category or group, make Jew a race so that you can hide your duplicity. That's all that's going on. You can't have it, guys. It can't be both. You can't be, well, he's a wonderful guy. Oh, but he's a racist. Let's listen to what Churchill believed again. Let's go back.
But history shows he's a racist. Now, why?
Why? I mean, the historical record here is clear. Even Boris Johnson admits that he was a racist. He was someone who believed that the white race was superior, that natives didn't have any right to their...
But if he believed the white race, shouldn't he have said, well, wait a minute. He just said, what did he said? He said, what did this guy say? He said he believed the white race was superior. Okay, what does this guy say?
entirely imperialistic French reasons. He realised that free Jews were a tremendous way of making a nation richer. And that was the reason that he did it. He appreciated their contributions to the arts, to science, to literature, to all of the great things. But he also wanted to ensure that France took advantage of their genius for commerce and finance. Churchill, on the other hand, very different. He wanted the maximum amount of liberty and freedom for Jews because he realised that they had given a greater contribution than any other race to the great causes of civilization in human history, and said so on a regular basis, despite many of the other people from his natural milieu, the upper classes, the British aristocracy of the late...
Huge contradiction, guys. So what color did Churchill think the so-called Jews were then? Because you know that when you look at your colors, there's black, brown, red, yellow, white. There's no color called Jew. No color called Jew. So this is what's problematic. And this is why they're going to attack Churchill, because you're thinking, why generally they say, oh, racism is bad, right? But why all of a sudden, listen to what they're going to do. Why are they going to be so upset at this guy attacking Churchill?
But history shows he's a racist. Now, why?
Why? I mean, the historical record here is clear. Even Boris Johnson admits that he was a racist. He was someone who believed that the white race was superior, that natives didn't have any right to their lands in the Americas, that Indians were a ghastly people, and just was a general imperialist racist.
Is there any way that we can say, because those were the views of their time, and the fact that he actually achieved something which saved, defended, protected our nation means that we can separate those things out?
That's the Jimmy...
This is the... Guys, it's like saying the fact that he protected and defended our nation. You got to understand, that's like saying that to so-called black people who are in slavery. He protected and defended our nation. They didn't really consider those people to be part of their nation. He was defending a system of white supremacy. So when you say really stupid stuff and you use words that are dumb and that you try to defend something that you basically, on one hand, you're telling your child that it's wrong, but then here you are on TV, global television, trying to defend what this guy said. Instead of just saying, yeah, that was wrong. Maybe we shouldn't put him on a pedestal. She says, well, isn't that just part of how it is during his time? As if time has something to do. You know what, guys? Oh, it's just, are you raping and molesting little children? Wasn't that just part of the time that he was in, of the raping and molesting little children? That's just part of his time. Like, that's what people did. Do you understand the stupidity of the argument? And to say our nation, well, obviously, if you're a racist, you don't consider black people to be part of your nation. They may be in the borders, but you see them as like a scourge upon your nation. Scourge.
defense, isn't it? It was just a bit different back in the day. Well, actually,
the likening Sir Winston Churchill to Jimmy Savile.
Well, let's make a better comparison. At the time, Leo Amory, the Secretary of India, not an anti-racist, actually said that Churchill's views were so extreme on India, he couldn't separate them from Hitler's. And the truth is, Hitler was a great military leader, a product of his time, and if they'd won the war, we'd be having a discussion now.
But luckily, we can separate.
So these guys are having a hard time with this, aren't they? They're really struggling. Because he's talking about Churchill being like Hitler, but this guy is talking about how Churchill loved the so-called people he's trying to identify as a chosen race. But highly proud. Do you see the contradiction? Do you see why something's very suspicious? You have the Balfour Declaration, which I just showed you. Don't you see why it's a little suspicious that, given that we know about British Israelism and how they thought of themselves as only certain groups of white people being the chosen race, and then how the so-called Jews end up being a European in nature, and they just happen to kill them and catch them on camera? I mean, maybe they made a sacrifice because they were like, look, how do we convince the world that the chosen race looks a certain way? Right? And they said, well, the Churchill was different than his the government. Right? And he says because Churchill was a wonderful guy. Then it comes out Churchill was a racist. Now I want you to look at this guy here. this guy here on the left, and this lady here. Now, these would be people you consider to be your liberals, guys. These are your liberal buddies, your liberal friends. And look at how they're acting. If you believe in the concept of race, imagine let's flip the script. Imagine they're having this conversation and Africa colonized, Europe. And they said, all so-called white people are savages and this and that and all these different things. And then the host is like, well, it's just kind of a man of his times, and you're sitting there with your child whom you love. And you're like, this racism thing is stupid. But some guy who believes in race is just trying to excuse it away and says, well, even though they called, white people savages and all this kind of stuff, I do believe in the concept of race. And, that's just the way it was back then, And they're challenging you instead. And this guy who's a professor. He's quoting history to them from people who are not, quote unquote, so-called minorities based on their classification of race. And they just will refuse. This is a refusal to accept the fact. And there's this unexplainable thing that's going on here where for some reason, I don't know why, it's very suspicious. They need to really defend Churchill. For some reason, they really got to defend him. Because you can't let the guy who's pro-Zionism, who's lauded and said all these great things about, these so-called people who we're going to identify as a Jewish race contributed all these things to society, when biblically speaking, we know that there's no such thing as a Jewish race. So first of all, he's lying. And this guy said Jewish race contributed more. So for some reason, he's elevating a certain group. And if he's a racist, he doesn't consider those groups to be what? Black, brown, or yellow, or red. So what color does it mean that Churchill identifies the so-called Jewish race as, guys? Very clear what's going on. So this little good cop, bad cop, we're going to pretend and hijack the definition of a Jew, and we're going to have to sacrifice and kill some people and fool a bunch of people into thinking that's what they are, just for the benefit of this small group of aristocrat elites who are playing on the idea of race, which is a mirage. It's a mirage. Let's listen to the guy again, and I want you to listen to the defense. I want you to listen to how these guys answer this guy. If you're not disgusted by this, guys, and again, we're all sinners, but if you're not disgusted at this, and you're wondering how we got here now, you're like, well, I don't understand. I wonder what you don't understand is colonization is still going on. Why do you think Obama gave $38 billion to so-called Israel? Do you think that's just because they're going to need to defend against a small group of people called so-called Palestinians? You think that it requires $38 billion and that's just aid after giving more aid? Do you think all this support and all this money is because, Churchill and these presidents just happen to love God's so-called chosen people? You really think that? You think there's not an agenda going on there? Well, let's keep on going.
Why?
Why? The historical record here is clear. Even Boris Johnson admits that he was a racist. He was someone who believed that the white race was superior, the natives didn't have any right to their lands in the Americas, the Indians were a ghastly people, and just was a general imperialist racist.
Is there any way?
So shouldn't at this point they should say, no, we refute that history, that's not true? At that point, shouldn't they just say, well, actually, that's not true history? If the history is true, the history is true. If the history is not true, the history is not true, guys. It's people are amazing. Is it true or is it not? We're not talking, he's a greater sinner than all of. We understand all of sin that comes short of the glory of God. I'm just simply saying the need for these guys to defend this guy is very suspicious.
We can say, because those were the views of their time, and the fact that he actually achieved something which saved, defended, protected our nation means that we can separate those things out.
That's
If I was that guy and I was on that show, I said, okay, well, I guess if we look at the men who may have raped and molested women and oppressed women, I think we should look past that too and just think that he was great and he saved our nation at that time. But by the way, while he raped and molested women and killed them, he also had women as slaves and thought that they had no rights. So if you want to say that's your nation, it's 'cause at the time they obviously didn't consider you to be a part of the nation. They didn't consider you to be part of society. You were just a subject of slavery within that society. You weren't part of it. Is that the attitude you take? And is that the attitude? Is that what you want to teach your daughter, Miss? This hypocrisy. And again, guys, these guys who are on this show, they're the liberals. They're the quote unquote liberals.
Savile defense, isn't it? It was just a bit different back in the day. Well, actually,
The likening Sir Winston Churchill to Jimmy Savile.
Well, let's make a better comparison. At the time, Leo Amery, the Secretary of India, not an anti-racist, actually said that Churchill's views were so extreme on India, he couldn't separate them from Hitler's. And the truth is, Hitler was a great military leader, a product of his time, and if they won the war, we'd be having a discussion now.
But luckily, we can separate Sir Winston Churchill from Hitler. Because they went up against each other in the war,
because
and
one
Sir Winston
won
Churchill
and
won.
one lost. The fact of the matter is that Churchill's views were so repugnant, and they actually led to 3 million people starving to death in Bengal because he was more interested in stockpiling rations for the war than saving starving Indians because he didn't believe they were really people.
Does it not matter to you one scintilla that Sir Winston...
So listen to this, guys. This guy's giving facts, and these guys are trying to play off. Well, but... He did do some good. And he's trying to play it off like he did all this good stuff for every single person. Like he's looking at, well, if you were part of Britain at the time, then when Churchill did this, he did it for altruistic reasons. He did that for the common people. Don't you understand? There was no agenda for the aristocratic elites. He did all this for the common people. You know, just like America. When America goes to war, they're doing it for Americans. It's about freedom. It's to keep America great. It's not war profiteering for the rich, for the elites. They're doing it for every man and woman and child in America. Don't you get it? Why can't you see this?
Churchill almost single-handedly rallied this country into winning World War II against the Nazis and Adolf Hitler.
Well, that's also not true. And
No, you notice that? Now, what did it go back to, guys? It went back to World War II. Now, if you look into World War II, you'll find out that a lot of these aristocrats were behind the war, wanted the war. They're not the ones who are dying. They're rallying the people to go die and fight for a war that's going to benefit who? The rich. Because when the war happens, the rich, the bankers, finance both parts of the war. They don't send their kids to die. They finance both parts of the war. They make money. They consolidate power. That's what war does. And so the fact that they were even duplicitous in the fact that they want to kill some people just so they can say, we need to do the photo op to show that the people we're going to try to identify for our future colonialist endeavors are now no longer white supremacy. We're going to claim we're doing it for benevolent purposes to save the so-called Jews, which we're going to classify as a race, which is a lie. That just means they're just wicked and duplicitous. That doesn't mean that they're great. He's some great man. See, they can't deal with the contradiction because you can't, one hand, the guy be this racist who let children starve in India, but then all of a sudden he's a benevolent, but he really cares about the Jews. But he's a racist. But he believes in the idea of the chosen race. Guys, there's no way in hell. See, they think people are stupid. They think people can't put 2 and 2 together. And that's what it upsets these guys because they really do think they're superior. They really, truly think they're superior. They think they're so superior that when a person like this person comes in and can see through it, this guy, you can tell this guy he's indignant that this guy would dare to come and say something. He feels like this guy should be grateful to even be on British soil. That how dare he even speak up against the ills that were done against his. Now, he wouldn't say that, but notice the hypocrisy. He's talking about the World War II and he's trying to say, well, we should be grateful for what he did for those. He's saying, well, you're trying to get me to defer to a war that was done against another group of a group of Europeans, and defer against the war and the killing and the atrocities are done against all these people of India and the South Americas and obviously so-called Africa. You're trying to get me to defer. You're trying to get me to be a respected person and say, well, let's concentrate on the good that he did and how he helped a war within Europe itself against other people of other Europeans. You want me to defer to that group as opposed to acknowledge all of the devastation that was done in the name of racism and colonization and imperialism. And you're going to claim, well, when he did this, he was being benevolent. He was doing it for me, even though he was oppressing people like myself. The level of insanity, is beyond. Let's go back and listen to how many people he said he let starve. Let's listen.
3 million people starving to death in Bengal because he was more interested in stockpiling rations for...
So 3 million, 3 million, a million here, a million there. Who cares? And listen to the reply.
...than saving starving Indians because he didn't believe they were really people.
Does it not matter to you one scintilla that Sir Winston Churchill almost single-handedly rallied this country into winning World War II?
Guys, listen to what this fool just said. He just told him about 3 million starving Indians, men, women, and children. And this guy is, instead of acknowledging that, he's jumped off to World War II. He sacrificed 3 million to try to save what? This, it's so foolish. It is so, if this does not drive you, if this does not get to you, I'm talking about from a hypocrisy standpoint, from look, we're all men are sinners, but this irrational justification and trying to justify this guy. These guys will point out that MLK was having an affair on his wife, and supposedly that's one of the things they hated about him. They didn't hate MLK because he was having a affair. They hated MLK because they were saying that he was trying to disrupt the social order of things, that he was trying to unify people of all different types and groups under a proletariat struggle. And he was saying, why are we going and fighting all these wars in these nations when you, and under the guise of freedom, when you have people in your own country that you're overlooking? You can spend $50,000 per person to go and fight a war, but you can't give that money to help educate and provide for your own citizens. That's why they hated MLK, is when he started talking about the economic and hypocrisy, that's when he had to go. So don't let these guys fool you. See, it's an elite, aristocratic, supremacist thing, and they're just using the invention of race as a tool to divide people below. And these guys are playing into it, and you can tell they're instruments of the because who's doing the commercials? Who's pulling the strings in this TV station? Who's funding it? Why are they sitting there? Why is when this guy's saying something, they're not even acknowledging, and they're trying to do this? Well, let's weigh out the good and the bad. He did more good relative to them. But let's say if it was 3 million of his people 3 million people whom he identified with as his so-called kinsmen. See, he's proving that he doesn't see the 3 million Indians as his brother, according to the flesh. He doesn't see them as his brother. So something's amiss. Something's not right. Because if it was about people and loving people and the injustices, then you don't just dismiss with carelessness, but apathetically dismiss the starvation of 3 million Indians. It's just, I don't know.
The Nazis and Adolf Hitler.
Well, that's also not true, and misses the point.
That is completely true.
People in India...
Which part of that statement is not true?
One man did not win the war. People in India, people in the Caribbean, people in Africa also contribute to the war.
You don't think...
The idea that one person won the war is crazy.
Your hatred of Winston Churchill is such that you cannot...
Notice he said your hatred of Winston Churchill. Guys, This kind of listen to how this guy, he just got very emotional. Your hatred of Winston Churchill. The guy just told him facts. He gave him quotes. He told him stuff. And what he should say is he said, "Oh well, we need to get a. Is that historically true? Because if that's historically true, that's a horrible thing. I didn't know these things. I guess there's none good. I guess people, are biased. He must have been biased in who he decided he wanted to help and who he didn't care to help. Well, he should be like, well, I guess that's kind of hypocritical, huh? So, I mean, you can't call a guy saying he's saving one life if he's doing this to little men, women, and children. That's not right. At a minimum, he should say, well, yeah, we acknowledge that's not right, but because we're, because we're British, we respect him because of what he did for the British, but we acknowledge there's a lot of stuff that he did was wrong. Men are fallible, and biased. We get that. And we're glad we have people who are diverse people now who can help point out these biases, and we can make the nation better because we'll understand those different perspectives. And because of our diversity, maybe that'll be a guard against us doing that to other people, because now we're quote unquote a cornucopia of diverse perspectives and cultures. Like, he's not saying any of that, guys. He's just, do you not respect him? Do you not
give him credit for rallying the mood of this country when everyone thought the war was done and dusted?
Including all those people, by the way,
Here's
that
a
you
better
mentioned.
question. Is your view of Britishness so myopic that you can't understand that people in India, Africa, and Caribbean count just as much as people here? And for people there, people's families starved to death because Churchill couldn't be bothered to send them rations.
Of course Churchill's a hero. Look, there is no doubt that in different times...
Of course, I mean... these guys, of course he's a hero. He's your hero. You can say he's your hero. You doesn't have to say, these guys what's so dumb is they're like, well, he's a hero and we have to all agree. No, you don't have to all agree that he's a hero, because there's a time when you didn't even agree that I'm a citizen, that I can be a free man. So we're not going to wait on your agreement. Like, if the so-called, I don't believe in race, but if the so-called black man here said, you know what? I don't think you guys should be free. I think you guys should be all subservient to me. And I don't think you guys deserve full citizenship. I'm taking away your right to vote, your right to own land, your right to own guns and arm yourself, and you can't testify against a black man in court. And that's what I think. Right? They would be like, I don't care what you think. We don't have to all agree on anything. You're not the one who's going to dictate to me my level of freedoms. That's what they'd say. But they're being very hypocritical right now.
You could say all those Americans who go on about how great America is should get out of there because they nicked it off the indigenous population. And that is part of history. And maybe we should say the same about the Italians coming here in Roman times. Look, if it hadn't been for Winston Churchill, and hey, we all have flaws, I think we probably would not have had the stomach to take on Hitler.
Absolutely.
So he rallied everybody in this country at a time. Just remember
And around the world.
Remember when? And can I just say? I want to say something because I quite like you, and I've seen you on TV before. When I was at school, and this is bad. When I was at school, I never learned that any Asian or black soldiers fought in the Second World War. I think that is terrible. But back on to Churchill. Of course, he is a British hero, like Margaret Thatcher, like various other people I could think of. When what's-his-face came back and said, there will be peace in our time.
Chamberlain.
Thank you very much indeed.
Guys, these guys are, this is you see the nuts? The nuttiness? See, that's the cherishing of colonialism. That's all this is. This is worshiping of the social order of things. That's all this is, worshiping the social order of things. This is saying, look, this is exactly what this guy is saying. They're basically saying, well, the contribution to society without Churchill, without this thing. And then what's so funny is it's all a ruse. It's a ruse anyway. The war was started by elite people to try to consolidate and further colonize. That's why the war was started. It wasn't started for any altruistic reasons. If it was altruistic reasons, then you have to explain him being an ardent racist, but at the same time saying, oh, I believe the Jews contribute more to blah, blah. So obviously Churchill didn't believe them to be people of color at all. He must have identified them as being what? Like himself. Can't have it both ways, guys. Now let's go and play something else. Now we have that, and I showed you the Balfour Declaration. Let's go back to this, because she's talking, these guys are trying to, say Churchill's such a great person. Decades. This is Alison Weir, and she's going to say Against Our Better Judgment. She's going to give you a little background and history on Zionism. Now, mind you, she also she's bought into the lie that Jew is like maybe a race. I think she maybe thinks that too. But again, once you understand Jew is not a race, guys, you can see through this lie. You see through it so clearly. You're like, I'm a Jew spiritually. I've been converted, born again. Right? Jesus said, my sheep never perish. You believe not, you're not my sheep. I come but for the lost sheep of the household of Israel. Who are your sheep? Those who believe, who are born again, who have eternal life. Is that children of the flesh? No, the children of the flesh are not children of God. So you don't need to argue about the superficialities of the color of the flesh, your false identity as race. Men are going to do wicked things to try to hijack the Bible just so they can try to justify themselves and further colonize and say that they're doing it in the name of God. I'm letting you know that they're lying. My kingdom's not of this world. My weapons aren't carnal. Those guys are fighting for worldly treasures, and they're trying to deceive everyone. Right? Know that they're lying.
In 1914, there was a very significant occurrence. A man named Louis Brandeis, who was a prominent attorney in the United States, became the head of World Zionism. He had become a Zionist in 1912, and 1914, World Zionism, for a period, moved from Europe to the United States, and he headed it up. In 1916, he was named a Supreme Court Justice. He was very close to Woodrow Wilson, and he was an unusually significant Supreme Court Justice. Many of us have heard...
He was very close to Woodrow Wilson. Now, what about Woodrow Wilson, guys?
Faith in Wilson's assurances, however, were hard to reconcile with the brutal reality of race relations in America.
New York was a segregated city. Blacks have no political power. So some blacks are saying, why should we be fighting for this nation and these, white people who are oppressing us?
The situation in the Jim Crow South was even worse. A toxic mixture of rigid segregation and almost daily episodes of racially motivated brutality. In July, in East St. Louis, Illinois, an exchange of gunfire between blacks and police provoked an explosion of mob violence that reduced entire black neighborhoods to ashes and left hundreds of men, women, and children dead. 7 weeks later, a battalion of black troops stationed outside Houston encountered a campaign of harassment and violence from local whites. They responded by marching into the city and engaging in a pitched battle with police.
This was the worst fears of white Southerners come true. A group of black soldiers taking up arms and killing white people. There was a hasty trial. 13 soldiers were executed without the opportunity to appeal their convictions. And they very quickly became martyrs.
Throughout the summer of bloodshed, the president said nothing.
Woodrow Wilson grew up in the South. By any measure, Woodrow Wilson was a racist. He introduced Jim Crow to Washington, D.C. At a time when it was just starting to loosen up, he brought it back, and it became, for all intents and purposes, the law of the land.
Wilson is so disappointing. Because on the one hand, he's got this abstract vision of a more just world that has all of this potential and possibility in it. And then on the flip side, for all of his big ideals, he is such a narrow-hearted little man.
Angered by Wilson's refusal to speak out against the violence, 8,000 demonstrators conducted a silent protest parade down Fifth Avenue. They marched to the sound of
Okay, so Wilson was a racist. Wilson is the one, let's see. Woodrow Wilson was the one who had the movie Birth of a Nation.
Now, the Klan had a revival in the early part of the 20th century. Why was that?
Another fan of the KKK was none other than President Woodrow Wilson.
Tell me about the screening of the film called The Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith.
It was unfortunate for our country that the first movie ever screened in the White House was a racist movie by a racist Democratic president. The film led to the rebirth of the Klan in America.
Notice rebirth, birth of a nation, Israel, British Israelism, Woodrow Wilson, the British aristocrat elites. Remember Balfour Declaration? Okay, Lord Rothschild. Guys, this guy. Oh, Winston Churchill. Blah, 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 blah. This lady just talked about Louis Brandeis, who had a great relationship with Woodrow Wilson.
For a period, moved from Europe to the United States, and he headed it up.
So he moved from where? Europe to United States, right?
In 1916, he was named a Supreme Court Justice. He was very close to Woodrow Wilson, and he was an unusually significant Supreme Court Justice. Many of us have heard of him and hold him in very high regard. I was shocked. I had never known that he was a Zionist before this. Of course, I had not even known what a Zionist was. What I discovered about him, though, was somewhat appalling. Because I discovered that when you become a Supreme Court Justice, you normally resign all of your board memberships and affiliations because you're supposed to be impartial. So therefore, he did officially resign his public leadership of World Zionism, but in reality, he continued his leadership. His loyal lieutenants, a number of books tell about this, would come into his Supreme Court chambers, report to him about what they were doing, and he would give them orders to then go and carry out, right from his Supreme Court chambers. This is, well documented. But then I discovered something.
It's well documented, but it's a conspiracy theory.
Else that to me was extremely surprising and shocking. I read a book, one of the books, I would read many books. I looked for what I felt were reliable books that were footnoted, and then I would read their footnotes. And then I'd get those books from Amazon, and then I'd read those footnotes and order those books, etc. And one of the books that I got, I now have several bookcases of books, was a book called Israel in the Mind of America. A very establishment publisher cannot publish the book, and the author was a very establishment mainstream author, Peter Gross. He had been at the New York Times, he was at Harvard, he is the author of quite a few nonfiction books, very, very well respected. So in his book, he had a statement that Brandeis had, while he was a Supreme Court chamber, had been a leader of a secret society working to push Zionism in the United States.
Wait a minute. A secret society working to push Zionism in the United States? But we can't have these kind of conspiracies. That's silly. Hey guys, here you do. Go and get the book Israel in the Mind of America Peter Gross. Get the book. Okay? The guy's from Harvard. Kennedy School of Government. He's just some quack, right?
Quite a few nonfiction books, very, very well respected. So in his book, he had a statement that Brandeis had, while he was a Supreme Court chamber, had been a leader of a secret society working to push Zionism in the United States. I found that a shocking statement. He had a few pages on it. So then I looked to try to find what was his source for such, an astounding revelation. His source, it turned out, was the American Jewish Historical Quarterly.
Oops. Oh, well, that book... Look, the American Jewish Historical Quarterly, December 1975, pages 121 through 39. Guys, go look it up. I think this is called journalism. I think this is where you go and you do fact finding and you go find sources and you just keep quoting sources and you keep going through. And she's like, let me see where this leads me. And who's right? Was that The Parashim, a secret episode in American Zionist history. All right, let's keep on going.
An article published in, I have here 1975, I think it was actually 1978, this slide may be incorrect, you can see in my book, that there was an article called The Parashim, a secret episode in American Zionist history, published by a well-regarded scholarly journal. So then I looked at, who was the author of that astounding article? And I discovered that it was Dr. Sarah Schmidt, an Israeli professor who's still active and is at a mainstream Israeli university. I then found a few other sources that told more about the Parashim, but Gross and Schmidt are the main sources for what I'll be mentioning tonight, which is that it was an elitist secret society called the Parashim. The Hebrew word meant Pharisees and separate. And they spread out...
Okay, Pharisees and separate. Again, guys, you gotta understand, Darby, you're a chosen race. Thou art an holy people, replace it with race, a holy race unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special race unto himself above all races that are upon the face of the earth. When you understand how to read and how to interpret what they're telling you, you get what's going on, right? You got all these so-called, you got the races of Churchill, you got the races of Woodson. He just so happens to come out with a movie called Birth of a Nation, and Woodrow Wilson reformed the League of Nations, which became the United Nations, and also the federal banking system. And then America became basically the military war arm. And they're giving money and military contracts to support what? So the movie Birth of a Nation is just a coincidence? Let's go back. Let's go back here. Let's keep on playing it. Let's go.
The land to push this Zionist ideology and agenda. Now remember, this isn't something that Justice Brandeis did as a fraternity boy. Maybe he was 18 years old or something. No, this is when he was a sitting Supreme Court justice. There was even an initiation ceremony in which they swore allegiance to this movement.
Now I want you to listen to this. This is how they're trying so hard to tell you that it's America first, right? And they're lying, right? They're lying. Because America first, they're trying to tell you that everything that they do because they're looking to make America, keep America safe and blah, 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 and it's not. Well, let's think about it. If you have this agenda and you want to get people into war, well, if you're willing to kill 6 million people for your goal, what would stop you from killing American citizens on their own soil for your goal? Because obviously you're not loyal to really America. You're just trying to do global colonization. So to induce war, you would do all kinds of things, right? For that goal. And so that explains why Obama, who's a president, gave $38 billion to what? To so-called Israel, right? It all makes sense, right? Why the money's flowing one way and all this kind of, it's just colonization, guys. It's still the same old stuff. And that's what it's a secret society, that's all conspiracy theory, right? Yeah, you got this. Think about it. It's conspiracy theory, but you got this guy saying that, Churchill thought that these guys were, who he claims to be a race, were just contributors and, added to in the top and help advance society. He just talking that talk, right? You get You got the guy who we just showed where they were just so offended they just couldn't believe that anyone would say these things about Churchill because Churchill was what? Pro-Zionism. But he was a racist. So you got Woodrow Wilson a racist, you got Churchill a racist, but they're both pro-Zionism. And they're trying to tell you, oh, this isn't like a British Israelism, white supremacy colonization. This is something. No, don't identify that, right? There's nothing to see here. That's what there's nothing secretive going on here.
Put it ahead of family, of school, of nation.
Now I want you to listen to this. Until our purpose shall be accomplished, you will be fellow of a brotherhood whose bond you regard as greater than any in your life, dearer than that of family, of school, of nation. So what are these guys? Are they globalists? Are they patriots to a country, or are they globalists? They're globalists. Now, when they go have these things called the Great Global Reset, that's a globalist agenda. So why would you do that? Well, you would formulate global organizations, the World Health Organization, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, the League of Nations or the United Nations, because ultimately you're a globalist and you want global colonization. So you're doing it all by faking prophecy, but that's what you're doing. But your agenda is secret, because are you gonna tell people that, look, hey, our goal is to establish you're like, what's your ultimate goal? We're trying to say that we're a race, so we're going to be a race that's of the Lord thy God, and he had chosen us to be a special race above all races that are on the face of the earth. That's what our goal is. No, we don't want to say that. So that does not reek of patriotism, guys.
As early as 1915, one of the leaders of the Parashim, specifically Professor Horace Cowan from the University of Wisconsin, suggested that the British might gain a benefit from a formal declaration in support of a Jewish national homeland in Palestine.
See? A leader of the Parashim. This is World War... Guys, this is 1914. Well, guess who got America into World War I? Woodrow Wilson.
Quoted Wilson, it denounced the Reconstruction era when blacks briefly held office. It depicted blacks, played by whites in blackface, as ugly, vulgar, and uncivilized predators who liked nothing better than raping white women.
And look, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to try to portray...
Meet Chris and Mark. They've both heard of Bitcoin and Ethereum. While Chris is using each...
Here, they're going to give you a whole different view of Wilson. Let's listen, guys. It just came up automatically. Let's see.
When you hear the name Woodrow Wilson, you might think aloof, intellectual, the professor turned president with the pince-nez for glasses. And yes, that's how it's pronounced.
He was the college professor with the pince-nez, so he's easy to bash.
And that's a French word.
And that's a French word, good one.
But in his new biography of the 28th president, A. Scott Berg wants you to know that Wilson was no cold fish.
Woodrow Wilson was an extremely emotional, romantic man. I don't think there's been a more emotionally...
Anyway, they're trying to romanticize him, but see... They think people are stupid, guys. Listen to what people wrote 8 months ago. He was an intelligent, energetic man. He was also a racist. Look, Wilson was the guy who screamed "Birth of a Nation" in the White House. So, it's just so funny. There's always some apologists, right? I love how everybody's talking about the bad thing he did as the president. Woodrow Wilson signed off on the Federal Reserve banking system. Oh, but what a romantic. Get the F out of here. Right? Like all the things this guy did, he got America into World War I. Like it's crazy. It's crazy. Guys, it's absolutely nuts how people try to. So I'm just exposing to you guys the history is just riddled with lies, and let's just keep on going here.
For those of you that have heard of the Balfour Declaration, you may be connecting this up. I'll get into that. Well, let's look into that. Why would the British in 1915 benefit from a statement about a Jewish national homeland in Palestine? As I maybe mentioned quickly before, Palestine at that time was under the Ottoman Empire. The British had nothing to do with it. Huge as the British Empire was, it did not control Palestine. So why would this be significant to the British? What would they get out of it? Well, it turns out, let's look at what was going on during that time period in world history. As some of you may already remember, this was what they called at that time the Great War. Massive carnage. This was World War I. The British were at some points in danger of losing that war. In the first day of the Battle of the Somme, they had 60,000 casualties in one day alone. So they were desperate to get the U.S. to come in on their side in that war.
So here's the plan. Here's the duplicity. Remember, these guys they're not loyal to country or nation or family or schools, right? And then you got Woodrow Wilson. This guy assigns Louis Brandeis, who came over from Europe. So Woodrow Wilson's basically just an agent. He's not, but he's at the level of presidency. So it tells you that America itself is a fraud. America itself is a fraud, meaning a lot of the people who are in power are fraudulent. They should, and by any stretch of the definition, they would actually be considered traitors, but maybe they're not traitors because you don't understand the point of America. The point of America is an illusion. It's not really what you think it is. It's a spin-off colonization offshoot of Britain, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
The German side also wanted the U.S. to come in on their side of the war. The American public, being what some people consider a bad thing, isolationists, did not want to join that war, did not see any reason to go to a foreign war that had really no reason to even exist, to kill and be killed. So Woodrow Wilson was elected to a second term with the slogan, "He kept us out of the war."
Notice, he kept us out of the war. And do you think now think about that. He kept us out of the war. Let's look at this, guys. 1917 Balfour Declaration. When was birth of a nation? Guys, 1915. 1915 Birth of a Nation. 1917 Balfour Declaration. How in the hell would they know to make a movie called Birth of a Nation? It's about reconstructionists. It's about making sure that we're establishing a nation that's supposedly going to fulfill Bible prophecy under the guise of what they're trying to change the Bibles and say is a chosen race. You see how stupid it is? Like they really do think you're stupid, guys. I'm not joking. They think everybody's stupid.
But I'm sure, as you all realize, he didn't. The United States did join World War I. So the Zionists saw this carnage and the British desperation as an opportunity. Chaim Weizmann, who was one of the British Zionist leaders, who later became the president of Israel, went to the British government and he claimed that they could help the British win the war because he claimed they could bring the U.S. into the war on the side of Britain. And especially mentioned Louis Brandeis as one of the ways that they would do that. Because of that sort of promise, this is mentioned in...
Right. Louis Brandeis was assigned by who? Woodrow Wilson. Louis Brandeis came from where? Europe. They had this war, and then who goes to them? Chaim Weizmann goes to them and says, hey, we can do... So this is all planning. This is all pre-planned scheming. All pre-planned. And then they want to say, we're going to blame. No, don't blame. They say, well, people are going to blame the Jews. No. Chaim Weizmann's not a true Jew. He's a Gentile who claims to be a Jew. See, this is the thing. See, they actually would love it for you because then they can say, oh, this is anti-Semitic. They want you to say, guys, they want you to use that racist language so they can just discredit you. But then if you say, well, wait a minute, how can Jew be a race? How can you convert? Are you saying that the Ethiopians aren't Jews? Because if you're saying that, then you're yourself a racist. See, they got no guys. They have no way around this. You can point out their racism; they would hate it, and that's what people need to do. You should, when they say, "Well, this is simple. I'm a Jew. I'm converted. I believe," and they're like, "No, you can't be a Jew." Oh, so I can't have a belief system, and you're telling me Jews are a race. And then you can go to the Lord. You say, "Well, okay, if you think it's a race, then could you explain Abraham? Could you explain Moses and his Ethiopian wife? Can you explain the mixed multitude?" And it said mixed multitude in at the Mount Sinai. So how do you explain that? Who are the Ethiopian Jews then? And how do you know who's a descendant of Jacob versus Esau? They're twin brothers. So if it's based on genealogy, how would you have one who's hated and one who's loved? How do you know who's descended from who? They're twins. Guys, their lies are so flimsy. It's so flimsy. That's why they need to do big things to get you to believe it.
Number of books, including by pro-Israel authors. And again, my book is thoroughly cited, so you can examine this information for yourself. This was called the Gentleman's Agreement. This is how the Zionists got what we today call the Balfour Declaration. It was sort of a quid pro quo. We'll help you win the war. Then when you defeat the Ottoman Empire, which was allied with Germany, and you're in charge of the Ottoman Empire, then you will facilitate Jewish immigration to create a Jewish state in Palestine. That's how the Balfour Declaration was enacted. By the way, Balfour was the foreign minister, Lord Balfour. It was written to Lord Rothschild, who was a Zionist leader. In addition, this was actually not written by Balfour. It was written by a different individual, and the text for it went back and forth to the United States. So after the war, which Britain...
So the text for it went back and forth to the United States. Guys, are you seeing the duplicity? Are you seeing this? What they're telling you in history, guys, is a lie. Yeah, they're killing actual people, but the whole reason and purposes of what they do is all a lie. It's all a lie. This is all just colonialization. That's all it is, guys. Oh, our purposes shall not be known until our objectives are met. You'll be secret above family, school, and nation.
Win with American help. There was a peace conference. Many of us remember reading about the Versailles Peace Conference and the Paris Peace Conference that went on, during which they divided up the spoils of war. And the Ottoman Empire was dismembered, and basically part of it was given to France and part of it was given to Britain. Britain got Palestine. Then Britain did allow increased Jewish immigration to Palestine, colonization, which not surprisingly led to violent conflict. Indigenous people don't want to be pushed out. And after a while, they realized that was what was going on. So there was violence between the two populations with innocent lives on both sides being lost. Then as now the large majority of those innocent lives were Palestinian Muslims and Christians. During this time, the Zionists in Palestine created two terror groups, the Irgun and the Stern Gang. This is widely known, but...
So they created terrorist groups, but they don't want to tell you about these terrorist groups, right? Of course, that's not it. They don't tell you about that part.
And I'm going to focus on the American aspect. By the way, the leaders of these two terror gangs went on to become prime ministers of Israel.
Oh, prime ministers. That's real nice. Terrorist group became prime ministers. So you're wondering how the violence and why the violence is there.
But what I hadn't known is that there were front groups in the United States with duplicitous names that were funneling money and weaponry to these terrorist groups in Palestine.
What? But this guy just talked about... See, I don't know what these guys are doing. Wilson is the great romantic. I really don't like the way they're doing that. Talking about Woodrow Wilson. He was a great man, guys. America would never do such a thing. I mean, we just go to countries because we want peace and freedom. We're not trying to provoke any war. It's not about war profiteering.
One of them was led by a man named Peter Bergson. He was called in the United States. His real name was Hillel Cook. There was another man who was named Baruch Korf, who was an American rabbi who had gone to Paris. This was after the war. This now we're talking about 1947. After the war, Britain periodically, because of the violence between the Zionists and the indigenous Palestinians, would actually try to restrict the Jewish immigration to Palestine. So after the war, they were restricting the immigration there because it was resulting in all this violence. So the Zionists hated the British for that. Even though the British had enabled their project, they now hated the Zionists, and they hated the British when we're killing quite a few British. So Korff was in Paris, and he was connected to the Stern Gang at that point. He and a group in Paris had a plot in which they were going to fly a plane to London and drop bombs on the foreign ministry. The first target had been Parliament, but then they switched it to the foreign ministry. The only problem with their plan, and this is, by the way, this is attacking Britain right after Britain had defeated Hitler, but they still hated Britain. So the one problem with their plot was that they didn't know how to fly a plane. Therefore, they found a young...
Does this sound familiar? 9/11, plane, didn't know how to fly a plane, but yet flew a plane expertly and did hairpin turn. Wow, amazing. Amazing. Just coincidence, guys.
An aviator named Reginald Gilbert, who was a crack pilot during World War II. He had, damaged many German planes, shot down some of them. So they got Reginald Gilbert to be the pilot, who would be the pilot for this plot. Reginald Gilbert pretended to go along with it, but then he secretly went to the American embassy, and they went to the Paris police and Scotland Yard and divulged the plot. So because of that, it didn't go forward. But it was headline news all over the United States. When I was doing the research, suddenly as I got more search terms, all of these newspapers I discovered had major news stories about this event. I was very curious about Korff and Gilbert to learn what had happened with them in later life, and I discovered that Korff, he got away with it. He had very powerful friends in Boston and in Washington, D.C., so he was released from prison after a few months in Paris. And later in life, he became a close friend of Richard Nixon.
Isn't that odd, guys? So these guys who are basically terrorists, who are going to do these things against Britain, that's treason, and they get off, and then they have high level positions. And these guys are trying to talk about some 3 strikes you're out and criminals, and talking about some super predators and thugs. They're talking about gang violence in LA and Chicago. I mean, the hypocrisy, the rank hypocrisy, guys.
In fact, Nixon referred to him sort of fondly as his rabbi. Now, the precursor, and I know this is long, I'm getting near the end of my talk.
So Nixon called him his rabbi. That means he called him his master. Isn't that odd?
Precursor to today's AIPAC, one of the most powerful lobbying organizations in Washington, D.C., Fortune magazine puts it often in the top 2, is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Well, the precursor to that began in about 1939 with the creation of the American Zionist Emergency Council, AZEC, which by 1943 had a budget of $500,000 at a time when a nickel bought a loaf of bread. By 1941, they had $14 million. And by 1948, they had $150 million. It's a massive amount of money that they had at their disposal. And they used that to target every sector of U.S. society. This is not archaeology. They kept records of what they were doing.
So they kept records, and they used it to target every sector of society. But now today, they tell you that if you say that Zionism, they try to tie Zionism to anti-Semitism. Do you see how they're hiding behind? Do you see how this is working? I mean, seriously, do you see how this is working? I mean, you see how slick this is? Well, we can just hide behind the idea of there being a race, and if anyone says anything, we'll just say they're being anti-Semitic. But we're gonna say it's this plan is secret, brotherhood, and you should be beholden to it above family, school, and nations. But don't say there's a conspiracy. You're sworn to say. Don't say there's a conspiracy. But we're going to get all this money and we're going to target all these different avenues. But there's no conspiracy, guys. There's crazy.
They targeted congressmen, Christian clergy, editors, professors, both business and labor, and Jewish war veterans because...
Well, of course they... Really, clergy? Really? Jim Hagee? Really? You think your pastors are teaching Zionism? You think they're influenced by money? Look, congressmen, clergy, editors. Okay, that's your news press. There's your church. There's your politicians. There's your school. There's your business. there's your labor, and then war veterans, who they call Jewish war veterans. We know that's not really true.
Very much propagandizing the Jewish population. They formed 400 local...
Well, propagandizing the Jewish population is the fact that they lie to them and tell them that they're a Jewish race. It's a belief. So they're trying to convince them, no. They're trying to fill them with pride. You're the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You're of a special bloodline. You're the chosen, how do we say this? You're chosen race. Like, I didn't know it was a race. I thought it was a belief. I thought it was a faith. And then anybody who claims to be Jew who sees it as a faith, they denounce them. They say, you don't have this, you don't share in our lie, so we denounce you.
Committees around the United States. There were millions of pamphlets. They funded books, made them into bestsellers, etc. They also worked very hard to manufacture Christian support and funneled money into Christian groups that would support Zionism. Now, during all of this time, there was a lot of opposition to Zionism by diverse groups. Christian leaders were often opposed to it for religious reasons. The State Department and the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies all said this would be very harmful to the United States. They opposed Zionism. And there were many Jewish anti-Zionists, as I mentioned earlier. Some of the most prominent pastors opposed it. Some of the pastors in the Middle East specifically went to the Paris peace talks to lobby on behalf of self-determination of the peoples in the Middle East. One of the most renowned...
Guys, they flipped that on its head. They're saying, well, no, you don't believe in self-determination for God's chosen race. You know, they lie and made it a race, but they're saying everything that they do, they accuse other people of. They love race because they're the ones to invent racism. I mean, there's just everything these guys lie about. They're just like, they just cannot stop lying. Whole thing is built on a lie.
Dead Sea scholars, Miller Burroughs, wrote a wonderful book called Palestine is Our Business, in which he wrote about Palestinians' rights and what was being done to them. It was our responsibility to bring justice. A Jewish writer named Alfred Lilienthal, who was a member of the American Council for Judaism, who wrote several excellent books, was also working and trying to inform people about what was going on and was opposing Zionism. The State Department, beginning as early as 1912, under Taft, opposed Zionists. When Woodrow Wilson sent a commission to the Palestine after World War I to see whether Zionism was a possible kind of movement, they looked at the situation in Palestine and came back. This was called the King-Crane Commission. Came back with a very strong, very powerful report saying that imposing a Jewish state on Palestine would be a grave trespass on the rights of the people, that it would be a huge injustice and that it should be abandoned. This got buried and had no impact. Then we had many State Department officials.
What? You telling me Woodrow Wilson, the racist, buried the report? So he's pretending to do something and he's just burying it? Guys, this is what they do. They get high-level people in high positions so that it doesn't matter if some underling gets honest. They just say, well, your superior is in our pocket, so it doesn't matter. Right? That's what all the money... That's what all the money's for.
Writing memoranda, the CIA writing memoranda, the Pentagon, all saying that supporting Zionism was both counter to U.S. principles, a number would point that out, and also that it would jeopardize strategic interests of the United States. The Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, was outraged that already by the 1940s, a domestic lobby was running foreign policy over against the interests of the United States. He said no group in the country should have that kind of influence to damage American policies. In fact, Secretary of State George Marshall, who was under Truman, said to Truman, I won't even vote for you if you jeopardize U.S. interests just to win an election. But Truman, like pretty much all presidents since that time from both parties, said, I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I have to answer to hundreds of thousands who are anxious for the success of Zionism. I do not have hundreds of thousands of Arabs among my constituents.
See how it goes, guys? But, it's supposed to be all conspiracy theory. Guys, do you think that the stuff that's written here, do you think this is all fake? Do you think she's not making this stuff up? She's telling you what was written. But why are they pretending now that there's no plan? Oh, there's no plan. We don't know what you're talking about. No, it seems like there's a plan. It seems like this is called. No, we don't really understand what you're talking about. What are you talking about? Wait. So she's the only one who can do research? Come on, guys. You think these guys don't know?
So after World War II, The British, there was so much violence between the Zionists and the indigenous population, and by the Zionists especially, but also Palestinians against the British themselves, that the British gave up. And they turned the question, the mandate of Palestine, they turned back over to the United Nations to resolve. The United Nations at that time...
So that's all fake and fun. Who formed the United Nations, guys? Woodrow Wilson, League of Nations.
Could have affirmed their charter principle, the bedrock principle of democracy, which is self-determination of peoples. The people on the land could finally have voted and created their own government and their own country, instead of living under somebody else's empire. But if they had done that, the majority, even after decades of immigration, even after decades of trying to buy up the land, the Jewish population at that time was only 30% and owned well under 10% of the land. So because of that, the Zionists pushed for a partition recommendation in which 55% of the land would be given to a Jewish state. Quite a good deal for them, given they were only 30% of the population. And the Palestinians would be left with 45% of their own land. This is typically presented as this wonderful opportunity that the Palestinians turned down. Well, I know what Americans would say if the United Nations told us, give away 55% of the United States. And the Palestinians didn't go along with it either. So rather than bringing peace, as we find the more unjust a situation, we see that in today's America and elsewhere, the more unjust the situation, the more violence that ensues. And there was outright warfare, in which there was a war that Israel calls its War of Independence, and the Palestinians call al-Nakba, the catastrophe, because it was a massive humanitarian catastrophe. At least 750,000 men, women, and children were very violently pushed off their land. There were at least 33 massacres. 16 of the massacres occurred before a single Israeli army joined the fray. Arab army joined the fray. By the way, again, unlike the myth many of us have grown up with, despite the fact that about 5 or 6 Arab armies joined the Palestinians in this war, eventually after 16 massacres they joined it, the numbers under arms, the Zionist forces were larger than the Arab forces. Now, one American journalist in particular tried to tell Americans about this massive ethnic cleansing that had taken place. Her name was...
Mind you, this is the person who's renowned, Dorothy Thompson. She's going to be very renowned. She's trying to tell people about what she sees. She's lauded as a great journalist. She's really doing her job. They love her. They're going to do movies and stuff about her. But what happens when she goes against the plan?
Dorothy Thompson. According to the Britannica, she was one of the most important journalists of the 20th century. In fact, I believe they call her the most important female journalist of the 20th century. And yet most of us have never heard about her. And yet she was an incredibly significant journalist. She had a radio program listened to by millions of Americans. She had a newspaper column that was in numerous newspapers across the country. She was considered the most powerful woman after Eleanor Roosevelt. She was such a celebrity that there was a Broadway play and a Hollywood movie in which she was loosely based on her life, in which she was played by first Lauren Bacall and Katharine Hepburn. She was a wonderful journalist. Before the war, she had been a foreign correspondent in Germany. She had been one of the first journalists to warn about the rise of Hitler. She was the first foreign correspondent to be ejected by Hitler.
So she was warning about the rise of Hitler. Of course, you understand that the British and the American government working together, they needed Hitler, right? Because without Hitler, you couldn't have the whole reason to further colonize, and they couldn't make or identify people of a certain complexion from Eastern Europe. They couldn't identify those people whom they killed as being part of the chosen race, and then you wouldn't have the chosen race lie. They needed that because you couldn't have it like, oh, anybody can believe in a mixed multitude. So they said, no, we need some pictures. We need to really get this through people's head that it's a chosen race. They needed it.
Because of her experience in Germany and seeing what had happened, and because of World War II, she was very sympathetic to Zionism. But then after the war and after Israel was created, she went to see this wonderful new Jewish state that had been created, and she saw hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees dying in large numbers under very harsh conditions every day. So she began to write about them and to speak about them. She even made a documentary about them. And for doing that, she lost her newspaper column, she lost her radio program, and she was erased from history, as her biographer calls it.
Wow. She's erased So let's get this right. The reason they went to World War II was because they were being benevolent and they just thought what Hitler was doing was atrocious. But the reason why this woman was silenced is because she's exposing the atrocities that were done against another group of people. So, but we're not supposed to see this as being racist, because if you put two and two together, you say, wait a minute, how can you be on one hand claiming you're doing things for human rights, but then on the other hand, ignoring human rights and silencing anyone who exposes it?
Because of this information. If I today, as another journalist trying to tell Americans, tried to write an article about some of the subject matter for American History magazine, I would fail. And the reason I can predict that is because we actually tried to place a paid advertisement for a book in American History magazine, and we were told by the owner, Eric Weider, that because our organization was allegedly anti-Israel, they would not publish our advertisement for a book. It wasn't about my book, it was just an autobiography of someone else.
Isn't that amazing? So censorship, guys, has been going on for a long time. Listen to this.
That they would not publish it in American History magazine or in any of the magazines he owns. This is the largest history chain in the United States, and according to their website, in the world, owned by an Israel partisan who will even censor paid advertising. Yet, despite these decades of filtered news coverage, of manipulation of all sectors of American society, yet it's very interesting. One would expect the American population to be rabidly and fanatically pro-Israel. And yet, surveys show that between 2/3 and 3/4 consistently say we should not take sides. This is actually quite a strong position. This means we would not give one side $10 million per day unless we're going to give it to both sides. This means the U.S. government would stop vetoing Security Council resolutions on behalf of Israel unless we're going to do it for both populations. So this is where the majority of the American population is. But at this point, people are not voting on this issue, they're not active on this issue, and they're not telling their elected representatives what they want. And so they're not getting what they want. The only way to counter any lobby is either with enough money or with a grassroots movement. Now, the Israel lobby has a massive amount of money. The Israeli media is always talking about it. Sheldon Adelson, a multi-billionaire, funds the Republican Party. Haim Saban, a multi-billionaire, gives major donations to the Democratic Party.
Wow, both sides. See, it sounds very conspiratorial.
There's a lot of money that's being mobilized on behalf of Israel in our campaigns, in our political campaigns. Very little on the other side. There's very little counter-lobby. Most times there are lobbies in Washington, D.C. They often determine policy. But quite often there are counter-lobbies. So some sort of balance and rationality usually results over time. In this case, it's very lopsided. The only counter to that are the voters. This has been done before. I was a student during the Vietnam War. I was on campuses where many of us...
Okay, I'm going to let it go at that, guys. So I just want to show you this. This is what's so crazy about it. And so part of this is like, again, you know, they want to tell you that it's not racism, it's not this, it's not that. But listen, let's just hear directly from a person who's over there now.
There are about 45,000 African refugees inside Israel's borders, less than 0.5% of its population. But despite their minuscule size relative to the population, they're treated as a national crisis in Israeli society. Likud member of parliament Miri Regev stated from the stage of an anti-refugee rally, "The Sudanese are a cancer in our body." Interior Minister Eli Yishai claimed that African refugees were raping many Israeli women, who do not complain because they don't want people to know they were also given aid.
So that's the same thing Woodrow Wilson. That's the same stuff Woodrow Wilson he did with the Birth of a Nation movie, right? He was saying the blacks would be unruly, they would go around and start raping white women, you know, everything that the slave masters did to the slave women. You know, that's why, like, you wonder, well, how all these super light-skinned babies end up back in the old days. You can look at some of the film. All these super light-skinned so-called black people. And like, how did that happen? Because we know they would lynch a black person if they even, you know, Emmett Till, look what happened to him, right? So you know that those really quote-unquote light-skinned babies, they must have came from the one-way relationship. That had to be the white man, so-called white man, with the so-called black woman, right? But listen to what this guy says.
He also stated Israel belongs to the white man.
Exactly. So that's the whole point, guys. That's the whole point of this. End of it all. End of it all. It's about control. Leader of the Parashim, right? What does the Parashim mean? Select, right? Pharisees went around suggesting that the British might gain some benefit from the formal declaration in support of a so-called Jewish national homeland for Palestine. Israel belongs to the white man. This stuff is coming right at these people. People are not putting two and two together. But look, that's what he said.
An Israeli police station in Tel Aviv also officially honored May Golan, a leader of anti-African campaigns that encourage violent attacks. And this incitement does indeed work. Just in November 2016, an innocent Sudanese man was beaten to death while walking home from work. The racism runs so deep, babies are even attacked. One man tried to murder a 1-year-old baby girl from Eritrea by stabbing her in the head. 92% of...
do you see how sick it is? So it comes from the same sickness, guys, that's in Woodrow Wilson, same sickness that's in, who's the British guy we just talked about? Winston Churchill. It's a level of sickness, guys. The whole head's sick. I'm going to let it go at that. I hope you understand. Praise my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, King of King, Lord of Lords. Amen.